I normally work for the New Carrollton Library as a library associate, but I guess now we're all working for the digital library. Um, so today I'm going to do a Crafternoon with you guys. It's going to be upcycled paper beads. In the first half, I'm going to show you how to make this necklace that I'm wearing right now. And in the second half, I'm going to show you how to make these pyramid paper beads, and you can string those together to make a necklace as well. So what is upcycling? That's a term that not everybody might have heard before. And it's basically using something that you would ordinarily throw away or recycle and making it something more beautiful than it was before. It's like the word is like a mashup of recycling and upgrading. You're giving it an upgrade instead of recycling it. So, why is that important? Well, first of all, what we're making this out of is paper. And paper, for the kids out there who might not know this, comes from trees. And trees are really important for the environment because they filter the oxygen that we breathe. So if we buy a lot of paper products, we're creating a demand that causes more trees to be chopped down, which means lower quality air that we're breathing. We can lessen that demand by recycling. Put stuff in the recycling bin that goes to a recycling facility, and people will use the paper to make new paper. But the problem with that is paper can only be recycled a certain number of times. A sheet of printer paper can be recycled 5 to 7 times, I think, before it just needs to be discarded. And also, a recycling facility uses resources. It uses a lot of energy. So we can save ourselves the need to use those resources, and we can preserve something like this for longer than it might ordinarily be in circulation by upcycling. There's also a great video that Teresa, a colleague, did on crocheting out of plastic bags. So that's another way to upcycle. So let's get into the paper beads. So what you're going to need is some paper, any kind of paper. I personally used corrugated cardboard. That's why you see all of these little ridges. And for the little spacer beads, I don't know how well you can see them. I used just paper from a magazine that I was going to recycle. You can also use a sheet of junk mail. I've also been using a sheet of printer paper that I had doodled on. I was practicing my calligraphy. That would also go in the recycling. And, there are like some colorful designs on it. So that would also be something you could use. So you need paper, glue, any kind of glue. If you don't have glue at home, you can mix together equal parts flour and water with a pinch of salt, and that makes a perfectly good glue. It'll be a little bit wetter than your average Elmer's glue, but that just means you have to let it dry for longer. You're also going to need a pair of scissors. You can rip the paper, that'll give you a different look, but, you know, I think we're kind of going for the rustic look anyway. You're also going to need something to wrap the paper around. I used a toothpick, but you can also use something bigger. The bigger your whatever you use to wrap the paper around is, the bigger your final bead is going to be. So you also want it to be, so that's going to be the size of the hole in the middle of the bead. So you want it to be bigger than whatever you're stringing your beads on, if you want to make a necklace in the end. I just used some yarn, so a toothpick worked fine for me, but if you want to, there are a lot of things that you can use to string the beads on. You know, whatever string you have lying around. You know, if you have like a t-shirt that has a hole in it, you can just cut a strip out of the t-shirt, string them on that. That's a great necklace. And you can do what Teresa did, and make some string out of a plastic bag. So to get started, I am going to cut a strip of paper. We're going to start by making these little tube beads. They're just little cylinders. This is going to be the easiest bead that we make today, in the first half. And to do that, I'm going to cut a piece of this junk mail. And I'm going to use a straight edge, just so that it's a little neater. I don't think you need to use a ruler. I'm also going to lay down this piece of scrap paper, so I don't get glue all over my table. So I'm going to use this magazine as a straight edge because it's what I have. We're in quarantine. We don't want to go out and buy some new supplies. So I'm just going to lay the junk mail down, lay the magazine down in a straight line, aligning the edges like that. And I'm just going to cut the junk mail along the edge of the magazine, so I get a straight line. Alright, so I have this long strip of paper, and I'm going to lay it down on my piece of scrap paper, and I'm going to lay the toothpick down on top of it, and I'm going to just start by kind of guiding the paper around the toothpick. Just so that it learns the shape that you want to roll it in. See, it kind of like stays in that circle. So I'm going to put the toothpick back in there, and then I'm going to take my glue, and I'm going to put a little line of glue, just a thin line, you don't need that much, along the strip of paper, maybe every inch or so. Just a little line. If you remember the kindergarten saying, ... not a lot, that's perfect for this situation. You just need like 3 little dots of glue, and that's your line. So it'll look like this. White balancing. About an inch apart. So we're gonna start the circle where the toothpick is has kind of loosened up, so I'm just going to unroll it a little bit, and then tighten it, and then we're just going to roll the paper all the way down where the glue is. And the glue is just to help it keep its shape. Keep everything together. And honestly, this is the hardest that this bead process is gonna get. Just keeping everything nice and tight, because it kind of wants to unroll a little bit. So you just want to keep pressure on the paper as you're rolling it so it doesn't unroll. And just keep going until you get to the end of the paper, or until you get to the size you want. Maybe you cut a really long strip of paper and you don't want a really thick bead. So I think that's what I did here, so I'm not even going to roll all the way down to the end. I'm just going to cut off some of that excess. And then just squeeze it together for a count of, let's say a count of 10. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1008, 1009, 1010. I'm going to check to make sure if I take my finger off it's sticking. No, it's not sticking. Alright, I'll just hold it for a little bit longer then. Alright, that actually took me more like 30 seconds. I don't know if you could tell, but this is a lot thicker than like your average printer paper. It's more like cardstock. With like printer paper or magazine paper, it's pretty much just gonna stick right away, but this took me about 30 seconds. So this is the first bead. Super easy. It's got, you know, a little hole in the middle. So I chose a color that I like making jewelry out of. I chose green junk mail. But if you don't like the way the final product looks, that's alright. You can just, you know, if you have some paint, you can paint the outside of it. You can even just take like a marker and just, you know, color the outside of the bead. And then maybe add some glue over that, because depending if it's a washable marker, it'll probably, the color will come off on your fingers. So that's the first bead. That's just one long straight strip of paper, wrap it around a toothpick or a pencil, or just anything that's like the size, the length or greater of the bead you want, and the width, the circumference of the hole that you want. So next we're going to be doing these bigger cardboard pieces. So for that, we're going to need a piece of cardboard. You can also do this out of, if you want like a really big bead, it's going to be hard to get these ridges, which is what I really like about the cardboard. But if you just want like a big bead that's in this like kind of flared shape, you can just glue like a lot of pieces of paper together, just to create like a really long strip of paper, and that'll get you the size and the shape that you would want. But for the shape, instead of doing a straight strip of paper, it's going to be like a really long triangle. So I'll draw out the shape for you that it's going to look like. It's gonna look like this. just a really long, thin triangle. I'll draw it out on the cardboard too. So here I just have like a big piece of cardboard. We've been getting a lot of deliveries because we don't want to leave the house right now. So I'm just going to, again, take the magazine, use it as a straight edge, and just draw a long, thin circle. So a long, thin triangle. The biggest part of the triangle is going to be the width of your bead. So if you want a smaller bead, you want to start the triangle out smaller, and if you want a bigger bead, you want to start it out bigger. So I'm going to do, I'd say about 1.5 inches. And I'm just going to draw out my triangle. And this is what it's going to end up looking like. Long, thin triangle. So now I'm going to cut it. Fortunately, this is a pretty thin cardboard. Some cardboard is like really thick, and you might have a harder time cutting it with just normal craft scissors. Alright, so here's my strip of cardboard. So now what I'm going to do is I want to reveal the ridges that are inside. So I'm just going to strip away the top piece of paper to reveal the corrugation, the ridges. And this is not difficult, but it can take some time because you want to try your best not to rip the ridges. I'll see if I can show you what it looks like up close when I'm stripping away the top layer of the cardboard. Not that interesting. Okay, so I finished pulling off the top layer and it looks like this. So one side is ridged and the other side is still flat. And the process for making the bead is going to be pretty much the same as the process for making the first bead, but the important thing is you want to start at the top, the wide side, not the narrow side. So we're just going to place the toothpick on top, and we're going to do a line of glue about, probably not even every inch. Let's say every 2 inches for this one. And then when you start to get to the narrow side, I'm gonna put a little bit more glue towards the end, so because that's going to be the part that's showing the most. So I would say it's more important for that to stick than the rest of it. So once you're done putting down the glue, it should look like this. A line of glue every 2 inches and then a little bit more towards the end. And then you just roll it up like the first one. So I'm going to put my toothpick down, and I'm just going to start rolling it. And you want to try to keep the roll centered. It might try to go off dramatically to one side, but you want to try to prevent that and just keep it centered. Do. And then I'm gonna hold this in place. Before the glue dries, you can kind of like slide it around to reshape it how you want. Don't do that after the glue dries. You will rip your bead. So I think I like this shape. Looks pretty centered. So I'm just gonna hold it in place for a count of 1030 or 30 Mississippi. So I'll see you in 30 seconds. So now we have the finished cardboard bead. And you don't need the toothpick after everything's been rolled up. So I like the color of the cardboard. I think it's like a nice, like rustic color. But if you don't like it, you know, just paint it a color that you do like. You can even just take a marker, color it in. So this is what it looks like colored in with marker. I also think that looks pretty cool. So to make the necklace, all you're gonna do is cut a length of string. I used yarn, but you can use any of the materials that I mentioned. And you're just going to string it through one of your cardboard beads. And I'm going to use a really big needle for that. If you have a big enough hole, you should be able to get by without a needle. But I made my holes very small. And then string it through one of your spacer beads, the little cylinders. I'm just kind of winding the yarn up tight before I string it through to give it a little less volume. I find that that helps. See, it's this compared to this. A lot easier to string through when it's nice and tight. And then I'm going to use this toothpick to push it through the hole. And there we go. Spacer bead, and then another cardboard bead. I'm going to need a needle for that one too. And then if you just continue with that pattern, cardboard bead, spacer bead, cardboard bead, spacer bead, eventually you'll get something that looks like this. And you can, you know, experiment with different materials. You don't have to use, you know, the papers that I used. You can use I don't know, a piece from a page from last year's calendar. You can use, a takeout menu, and you can experiment with the shapes too. See what happens if instead of like a long rectangle or a long triangle, you use like a circle, or like an oval, or different sizes and shapes of triangles. I think this is a really great opportunity for creativity. And I think the next step is to clean up your workspace, because let me show you what mine looks like. Super messy. And then I'm going to show you how to do a little bit more complex bead using origami. So now I'm going to show you how to make these kind of origami. This one isn't origami strictly because I taped it together. I cheated. But these geometric pyramid guys, and if you want to string them together, we're going to have to use a needle and thread. But if you just want to have these hanging out on your table, you don't even need that. You just need paper for this. You don't need scissors, because we're actually going to be tearing the paper, and you don't need tape or glue, except in this case because the paper I used was too thin. So I'm going to use my junk mail again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold over one long edge, and you want this strip to be much longer than it is wide. So I'm just going to fold it over so that the sides are aligned. And hopefully that'll be true. Down here as well. There we go. And since this is pretty thick, you don't have to use thick paper. This just happens to be what I have on hand. It's a lot easier to use something thick like this, or even like this is one that I did with printer paper, that I just decorated with some marker. That worked fine. I didn't have to tape it. Magazine paper was a little bit too thin, and I did have to tape it. But I do like the way it turned out. So with this cardstock, I'm just going to use the handle of my scissors to flatten the fold. So let me see if I can show you. There we go. I'm just running the handle along the fold to keep it nice and flat. And then I'm going to take this and fold it backwards to, what we want to do is we want to weaken the fold so that eventually we can tear the paper along that line. And for something like cardstock, which is pretty thick and the fibers are really strong, we're going to have to do this a few times. So that's 2 folds. This is number 3. 4, and then let's see if we can do it after 5. Yeah, this is tearing pretty well. So if it stops tearing along the line and starts to get into, the sides, just fold it back and forth a few more times, weaken it a little bit more. But this is actually, oh, whoops. see, I'm gonna follow my own advice, weaken it a little bit more. Start from the other side. And there we go. So it should be roughly an even length all the way, an even width all the way down. You want it to be really as close as possible to even. If it's like a little bit rough, that's okay. But if it's not like a rectangle, more or less, then it's not really gonna work. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna fold one of the corners down. We want this side, the short side, to be aligned with the long side, and the corner to be perfectly bisected. We want it to, the fold to cut the corner perfectly in half. And we're folding it towards ourselves. And again, since this is thick, I'm going to use the handle of the scissors to flatten the fold. Alright, so that's fold number 1. And then fold number 2, we're going to fold it towards ourselves again, this time on this line that was the bottom of the triangle. Again, folding towards ourselves, and we want to make sure that this edge aligns perfectly with this edge, Folding it down. Flattening it. So if you look, there's one diagonal crease and one straight up and down crease. That's a little harder for the camera to pick up on. One straight up and down crease. We want to do now another diagonal crease, and we want it to be going in, starting at the top up here where the two creases meet, and going in the opposite direction of the first one. So we're going to fold this edge down to meet the up and down crease. And again, we want to make sure the corner that's made by the up and down crease and the side of the paper, we want it to be bisected, cut perfectly in two by the fold. And again, I'm just using the handle of the scissors to make the crease just a little bit more obvious. So all of these, we have 3 creases now. We want them to all be folded towards us. If you know anything about origami, they're all going to be valley folds. Like if you're looking down at it, it's a valley like this, not a mountain like this. So basically we're just going to repeat this pattern of creases all the way down the strip of paper. So I'm going to repeat this fold that we just made, and then I'm going to fold the paper up so the side of the paper is aligned with the last up and down crease. Flatten it. And then I'm going to make another diagonal crease, other side of the paper, aligned with the up and down crease that we just made. And then instead of unfolding that, we're going to use this edge to fold up. The side of the paper should be aligned with the last up and down crease that we made. And I'm just going to fast forward until I've done all of the creases along the length of the paper. When you start to get to the end of the paper, it's probably not going to be, there's probably not going to be like a perfect amount of paper to do all of these triangles. That's okay. Just stop once you're like maybe an inch and a half away from the end. And if there's more than that, that's okay. But you do want a lot of these triangles. Let's say, I don't know an exact number, but you probably want at least 10. So I've taken the liberty of going over the first few creases in pen, so hopefully it'll make that easier to see, easier to follow the crease pattern. And so once you've done all of the creases, the paper should sort of be curling a little bit towards you, or in this case towards the camera, since that's where I'm pointing it. But what you're going to want to do is to form the pyramid. So I've labeled them to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to take edge A and fold it down to meet edge B. And then I'm going to fold this over again. So that it looks like this. It's already kind of starting to look like a pyramid. So that was 3 of these little squares, A, B, and C. And you can kind of see there's like an opening that's about the size and shape of one of these little triangles. So I'm just going to fold this triangle that's in the exact right place to fill that opening. And then I'm just going to pretty much repeat this process. And it should be a lot easier after the first couple folds. This triangle is the size and shape of this side of the pyramid, so I'm just going to fold it up to meet that face of the pyramid. And then same with this triangle and this face of the pyramid. So you're basically just going to wrap it around a few times until, so you can do it until the end of the paper, or if you want to, if you think your pyramid feels solid, you can stop sooner than that. Mine is getting pretty thick, so I think I'm actually going to stop here, which is like well before the end of my paper. So I'm just going to cut it at a crease, so there's just one unfolded square, and then I'm going to fold down the last triangle, and then see there's this little space underneath this last triangle. I'm going to use that as a flap and tuck the end of the paper into that little flap. And I'm going to wiggle it around so that it fits. Alright, it doesn't quite fit perfectly. This is not the best one I've done, but this is what it looks like. This is where I tucked it in. And that's the pyramid shape. And so if you want to make the necklace, I'm just literally going to use a needle and thread. I'm gonna pick a needle from my little cute little needle card book. I'm gonna take some thread, which is in a drawer so my cat doesn't eat it. Pick a length that's about, you know, what you want your necklace to look like. I have a pretty big head, so I'm going to use a lot. Cut it. Thread the needle. And then we're just gonna sew through. I have 5 of these pyramid beads, and I have them, like, they're all different sizes, but they all have some green in them. I thought that might be cool to do like a bunch of different sizes, but like different shades of the same color. And then just sew through one of those little openings. So I'm going to pick this one and just sew through, pierce through to the other side of the paper. Like probably it's like 1/2 centimeter away from a corner. And then just, this is about like 3/4 of the way down the thread. And I'm going to repeat that with all of the rest of the beads. Alright, done. So it looks like this. And then I'm gonna unthread my needle. And then I'm gonna take both ends of the thread and tie a knot at the end. Double knot, probably. And there's our necklace. I'd say you can wear it out to a nice restaurant, but nobody's going to nice restaurants these days. But I do like it, and I am going to show it off on Instagram. Alright, thank you for watching!